Shalom, Rabbi Ricki Lobel, very excited to be a part of the Jewish take at Mosaic Law again. So I'm holding up something that's one of the most familiar sights that we see when we go to a Seder at Passover. And this is the plate that presents us with the really important symbols of the day. And usually when we look at those items, we see it through the lens of our history. But I think this year, none of us will really be able to help but take a look at it in light of today. So I want to go through the symbols with you. Over here, we have the shank bone. This is supposed to remind us of the lamb whose blood was protection for us. If blood was on our doors, then that meant death stayed away. I don't think any of us can get rid of the images of houses with blood on the doors, blood on the walls, that we saw since October 7th, because the blood meant that death did come in, that we weren't protected from it, and our people were not spared. Down here we have the charoset, a mixture of chopped apples and nuts and wine that's supposed to resemble the mortar that was used when our slaves made bricks. Now we know that the mortar is going to be needed to rebuild homes that have been damaged and destroyed. It's going to be needed to cover up bullet holes in the walls. It's going to be needed so that we can recreate homes for people to, we hope, soon come home to. And it's going to patch up the holes in their lives. Here in the middle, we have maror, bitter herbs. It's supposed to be a symbol of the bitterness of our enslavement in the past, but now it is the bitter pain and the hostages are feeling, that their families are feeling, that all of us who long for their freedom are feeling. Because this year, captivity is being revisited, not just remembered. And modern bondage is just as bitter as historical bondage. Down here, we have chazeret, a second bitter herb. Usually it's romaine lettuce. And the interesting thing about romaine lettuce is that as it grows in the sun, the top part of it, the leafy part, becomes very sweet. But any part of it that's kept in the ground for too long, kept hidden and underground, becomes very hard and becomes very bitter. And we think of that with our hostages who are being held in tunnels or in underground facilities, unable to get to the light. And the longer that lasts, the harder the line is that people take in trying to decide what the solution might be and what actions to take. And the more bitter people become that those actions have not been taken. We have a roasted egg here, and we recognize it because of the brown burn marks that are on the shell. It's supposed to represent the burnt offerings that were once given in such love. But now we think of homes that were set on fire, of places where there are brown streaks on the walls because of those fires and explosions. We think of the smell of ash in those homes, and what was once a sign of life is now charred and unrecognizable. Down here we have karpas, a green vegetable, usually parsley, but what's important is that we have to be able to say borei peri adama over it. It has to have come from the earth and found its way to flourish in the sun. We don't know if this is going to be the experience that our hostages are going to have, if they will finally emerge into the light and be safe and be able to flourish again. This karpas is always dipped in salt water that reminds us of the tears that were shed in slavery and of the sweat due to the hard toil that they underwent. Today, these tears are our sorrow and our fears for what might or might not happen, for how long this might or might not continue. And in our own way, we are sweating out the situation as we wait. The final symbol, matzah, that will be on the table, is called halachma anya. Most people look at that anya as coming from ani, from affliction, and we say this is the bread of our affliction. But the Talmud tells us to look at it differently, that this is from the word la'anot, to answer. This is the answer matzah, because all of the questions that we have, we can look to the story and to the matzah for the answers to tell us what's happening. And when we think about the hostages, the matzah does hold the answer. It also was taken in haste. It also was carried far away. It also is unable to rise because of very strict restrictions. It's also fragile, but it's also, when it's broken, just as wanted and desirable as if it were not. And just like with the matzah at the Seder that is broken, we cannot continue until we find it and all share in joy with it. As with the hostages, we are not a complete people until they rejoin us. So I think that this year there will be another question. We usually ask, Ma nishtana halayla hazeh, how is this night different? Many of us will be thinking, Ma nishtana hashana hazeh, how is this year different? And one of the ways that this year is different is that what we say at the end about Zman Cherutenu, the season of our freedom, is all the more urgent than it was before. And the need to be able to say, L'shana haba'a b'Yerushalayim, may they all be returned to Jerusalem, to Zion, is even more in our hearts this year. I hope everyone has a peaceful and beautiful Passover season, and that we become a complete people again soon.